It was already night, and the city never stopped breathing urgency and indifference. Adana walked barefoot on the wet sidewalk, the baby curled in her arms, feeling an empty stomach and a heavy heart. Every passing car ignored her presence until the last bus appeared crowded. She boarded silently, believing it would just be another tiring trip. But in that noisy bus, her world was about to turn upside down. Adana pressed the baby against her chest as she walked along the wet streets of Lagos, feeling each muscle in her body beg for rest. The cloth wrapping the boy was already damp from the fine drizzle falling, and her feet ached inside the worn sandals. It was the end of another day of struggle, just like so many others that seemed endless. Since her husband abandoned her, leaving her with a baby in her arms and debts piling up, Adana had become a silent warrior. Every day, even before the sun rose, she tied her son on her back and crossed busy streets to reach the Balogun market, where she spent hours selling fruit, carrying boxes, and sweeping up remnants from the previous day. Her body was slender, but her resilience came from the necessity to survive. That night was no different. She returned from work with only a few crumpled notes in the pocket of her apron, a result of a whole day on her feet, smiling at customers who barely looked at her. The smell of fish, sweat, and market dust still clung to her skin and hair, and her arms trembled from the effort of holding the baby and her diaper bag at the same time. As she walked toward the bus stop, the world around her seemed to ignore her. Luxury cars sped past, splashing dirty water from the street, and no one even slowed down to avoid getting her wet. But Adana had already grown used to invisibility. To many, she was just another woman with a child in her arms trying to survive in Lagos. When she finally saw the bus approaching the bend, she felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The vehicle was crowded, as always at that hour of the night, and a line of people pushed to get in. Taking a deep breath, she struggled to board, shielding the baby with her body while trying to find some space to stand. The inside of the bus was a portrait of a city in motion. The smell of gasoline, sweat, and street food filled the hot air. Loud voices debated politics, football, and the price of rice. The honking of horns and the old engine of the bus created a symphony of exhaustion. Adana leaned against whatever she could, trying to form a human shield around the baby. Every shove felt like a battle, and her body, even exhausted, remained steady. She looked out through the wet window and saw her own reflection, with deep, dark circles and disheveled hair. The driver suddenly accelerated, as he always did, and the sudden jolt almost threw her backward. Her heart raced, and for a moment she felt the despair of possibly falling with her son in her arms. It was at that moment that a firm hand grabbed her arm, preventing her fall. The touch was warm, secure, and steady. She slowly turned her face and saw a tall man in a dark suit with a calm expression sitting at the back of the bus. He looked at her attentively, but without judgment, as if he were the first person in a long time to truly see her. In that second, the noise of the bus seemed to dim. Adana, who spent her days fighting alone against the world, felt a strange sense of security in that silent touch. She barely knew that. This simple gesture on that rainy, exhausting night would be the first step in a turning point that would forever change her destiny. Who here has ever had a day when it felt like carrying the world on your shoulders like Adana? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. Next to her, sitting on one of the last benches of the bus, was a man in a dark suit, tall, broad-shouldered, with an upright posture that exuded silent authority. His deep eyes, nearly black-brown, observed the scene in silence, analyzing every move of the young mother as if he could feel the weight she carried. That man was Chike Obi, 39 years old, the most powerful man in Nigeria. To the newspapers and news outlets, he was the businessman who turned everything into gold: banks, hotels, supermarket chains, and even newspapers under his name. To the people, he was almost a living legend, a towering figure, unreachable. But there, squeezed into the crowded bus, no one recognized him. Without bodyguards, without a bulletproof car, without camera flashes, he was just another face in the crowd. And in that moment, that brought him a strange sense of relief. He had decided that night to leave his luxury car in the garage, tell his driver to rest, and try what he hadn't done in years: be invisible among the people carrying his country on their backs. He wanted to feel the city's noise, the human heat, the trivial conversations about football, politics, and food coming from all sides. He wanted to hear real people, to remember that life existed outside the cold walls of his silent mansions. and the meeting rooms filled only with greed and falsehood. Cheek wasn't just a powerful man, he was a lonely one. For months, he hadn't touched a woman, not for lack of opportunity but out of fear. His last relationship ended bitterly. A girlfriend who only saw in him a ticket to luxury, and who, when she left a deep wound in his ability to trust. Since then, he had closed himself off, wearing expensive suits and endless meetings as walls against any emotional closeness. When the bus suddenly jolted, almost causing Adana to fall, he reacted instinctively, extending his arm to hold hers. In that quick touch, he felt a truth he wasn't used to feeling. Her hand was light, almost trembling, yet firm in holding the baby. It was a hand of someone fighting every day for survival, someone who knew hunger, fatigue, and the courage born from necessity. For a moment, Chika's heart raced in a way he hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't physical attraction, not at that moment. It was human recognition, as if, in a second, he had touched the real life he had often ignored behind the smoky windows of his cars. He looked at Adana's face and saw the traces of silent war she was living. Deep, dark circles from lack of rest, disheveled hair pulled up haphazardly, with strands sticking from the rain, dry, trembling lips pressed into a line of resistance to not break down. The contrast between the two worlds collided silently at that moment. He surrounded by luxury but empty of affection. She surrounded by hardships but full of courage. That simple touch on her arm awakened something dormant inside him, a reminder that he was still human, that he could still feel beyond numbers, contracts, and loneliness. The bus moved on, jolting through Lagos's soaked streets as if nothing had happened. Conversations continued, the driver's shouts echoed, and Adana's baby let out a low yawn of sleep. But inside Chike, everything had changed. He couldn't stop looking at that woman who seemed to carry the entire world in her arms. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but something within him whispered that that night wouldn't end like all the others. If this story has touched your heart so far, leave your like now. It shows you support emotional stories like Adana's and helps this video reach even more people. The constant sway of the bus rocked the night, like a melancholic song. Exhausted from a whole day of fighting, Adana finally felt her body surrender. The baby was the first to drift to sleep, releasing a heavy sigh of relief while his tiny fist still clung to her dress fabric. Shortly after, her head slowly tilted, seeking rest where there was no comfort, until she found Chiki's firm shoulder. In that instant, the world seemed to pause for a few seconds. The noise of conversations, the engine's rumble, the distant honking of a horn on the street, all became muffled and distant sounds. Chiki froze, unsure of what to do. It had been years since someone approached him so purely, so without interest. Adana's touch asked for nothing. There was no demand, no expectation or hidden motive. It was just a silent plea for rest, which somehow broke through the defenses he'd built over the years. Her simple perfume, a mixture of cheap soap, rain, and work sweat, discreetly rose, bringing with it a strange feeling of home he had forgotten. And the warmth of the baby, resting in his mother's arms, radiated an innocence that warmed something inside him that had been cold for years. It wasn't sudden passion, nor physical desire. It was raw humanity, a reminder that he, a man who had everything money could buy, lived surrounded by loneliness and emptiness. Cinematically, it was a scene nobody would ever imagine for Chiki Obi. The tailored, impeccable, expensive suit now had a strand of Adana's curly, disheveled hair caught on the fabric. The city lights, reflected in puddles and wet bus windows, highlighted the stark contrast between those two worlds. He, a symbol of power and wealth, isolated in glass towers and cold meetings. She, a symbol of struggle and resilience, with calloused hands and a body bowed by the weight of survival. Chike felt his shoulder grow heavy with her presence, but in a strange and good way. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if life had paused to remind him of what truly mattered. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in slowly, and a wave of peace washed over his body. Not the peace of closed deals or silent mansions, but a genuine peace, born from simple human connection. And then, in the silence of his own heart, a truth hurt more than any blow. The man who had everything and perhaps had never truly had anything at all. If your heart felt heavy at this moment too, leave a comment below. My heart felt it. The bus jolted violently when the driver suddenly slammed on the brakes. The screech of the brakes echoed through the vehicle, causing some passengers to grab onto the metal bars to avoid falling. Plastic bags flew across the floor, spilling fruits and bread. One man complained loudly, while another muttered words of irritation. Amid the chaos, Adana's baby let out a short, sharp cry, startled by the jolt. The little one clung to his mother's blouse, seeking safety. With a quick motion, Adana cradled him, whispering softly, "Shh, Mommy's here, my love." Within seconds, he calmed down and nestled back against her chest, breathing heavily, oblivious to the chaos around them. Adana blinked slowly, still dazed. Sleep and exhaustion had created a fog in her mind, and for a few seconds, she couldn't make sense of where she was. The sound of honking outside, the rumble of the engine, and the stifling heat of the crowded bus slowly came back into focus. It was only then that she realized where her head was resting. Her face was pressed against Cheek's firm, warm shoulder, and she caught the faint scent of his expensive cologne mixed with the damp fabric of his suit. A wave of shame and vulnerability surged through her body. Her heart raced suddenly, her cheeks flushed with warmth. Carefully, she pulled away slightly, feeling the need to apologize. "I'm sorry. I'm so tired," she murmured, her voice trembling, heavy with exhaustion and the silent humiliation of having fallen asleep in public. Chika turned his head slowly, meeting her eyes. His deep, almost hypnotic brown eyes carried years of silence and solitude, but in that moment, they sparkled with something unexpected: empathy. "No need to apologize," he said in a firm yet gentle tone, as if trying to offer reassurance. "You seem to be carrying a lot on your shoulders." His words hit deep. It wasn't pity or judgment. It was as if someone had finally seen the weight she carried alone. For a moment, everything around them faded away. The noise of the engine, the voices arguing about football and politics, the vendors shouting outside. It all vanished, leaving just the two of them in that crowded bus. Adana's breathing was still rapid, but a strange calm began to settle in her chest. Cheek's gaze was a silent anchor, steady and warm, as if saying without words, "I see you, I see your struggle, I know you exist." She lowered her eyes, feeling shame mixed with reassurance. It was as if the weight of all her days of struggle had become a little lighter, just from meeting a gaze that didn't look away. Cheek, in turn, remained silent, but inside he felt something break. He who had everything stood before a woman who had nothing but courage, and in that moment, he felt that perhaps this encounter wasn't just a coincidence. The world began to spin again, slowly. The bus moved through wet streets, and the city lights reflected in the puddles, painting the scene like a vivid canvas of contrast between pain and hope. Outside, horns, laughter, and the sounds of Lagos nightlife. Inside, a silent connection that would change two lives forever. If you've made it this far, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because this story is just beginning, and what comes next will keep you hooked until the very last second. The bus jolted one last time before stopping at the central terminal in Lagos. The hiss of the brakes cut through the humid air, and a hurried line of passengers squeezed to get off. The street smelled of gasoline, fried food, and fresh rain, the typical scent of the city after a long day. Adana was the first to step onto the sidewalk. With her baby held tightly against her chest and a diaper bag in hand, she felt her feet throb inside her worn sandals. The cool, damp night breeze touched her face, bringing brief relief. She took a deep breath, as if that moment in the open air was a small taste of freedom after the stifling bus. Behind her, Chike stepped off in silence, hands in the pockets of his dark suit, his steps measured but his gaze fixed on the young mother. In just a few hours, this woman had broken through invisible walls he had built over years of solitude. It wasn't just her beauty or fragility that drew him in, but the quiet dignity of someone who carries the world without asking for anything in return. He took 2 steps forward, ready to call out to her. He wanted to hear her voice again, perhaps ask her name, offer help, but the moment was cut short by the sound of tires skidding on the wet street. A black armored SUV pulled up precisely beside the terminal. The headlights reflected in the puddles, illuminating the young woman's surprised face. The front door opened with a click. A tall driver in a dark uniform stepped out hurriedly with an umbrella in hand and announced firmly, "Mr. Chike, finally, let's get you home." Time seemed to freeze. Adana froze on the curb, her heart pounded, and the world spun in slow motion. Mr. Chike. The name echoed within her. Everyone in Lagos knew it. The realization hit like a physical blow. The man who had supported her on the bus, whose shoulder had been her refuge in a moment of exhaustion, was Nigeria's most powerful businessman, owner of banks, hotels, supermarkets, newspapers, a constant figure in the news, always alongside ministers and presidents, someone who lived in a world untouchable, unreachable for ordinary people like her. Her face burned, her hands grew cold, and she nearly stumbled. Her baby, stirred, unaware of the turmoil consuming his mother. An impulse to flee took over her body. Disappearing into the crowd seemed like the only way out. Pride and shame mixed like fire and ice, while the memory of sleeping on his shoulder felt surreal, as if it had happened in another universe. Cheek noticed. His eyes caught her fear, her embarrassment, and her urge to escape. His chest tightened. If she blended into the crowd, he might never see her again. The driver held the door open, waiting. But Cheeky didn't move. His gaze remained locked on the scene. Her curly hair damp from the light rain, the faded cloth wrapping her baby, worn from use. Her resolute eyes, though frightened, carrying the strength of someone who fights every day. Around them, the city pulsed with honks and hurried footsteps, but for him everything was in slow motion. A single thought dominated. I can't let this woman disappear into the crowd. Her heart raced with shame and fear. His burned with a silent decision. He would do anything to keep her in sight. But unfortunately, he lost her. Adana quickly slipped away, disappearing into a nearby street. The millionaire returned to his car, but that moment would never leave his memory. What do you think? Should Cheek have taken action? Let me know in the comments. The next night arrived grey and drenched, with low clouds blanketing Lagos. The rain showed no mercy, and each drop seemed to weigh like lead on the city. Adana stood at an improvised bus. Stop, just a crooked sign by the roadside. Her baby cried from hunger, bundled in the cloth that shielded him from the rain. Each sob cut through his mother's heart as she tried to soothe him. I know, my love. Mommy will find a way, she whispered, her voice trembling. The cold wind pierced through her dress, clinging to her tired body. Rainwater trickled down her neck, soaking even the hem of her skirt. Each distant thunderclap seemed to herald a night longer than all the others. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Cheeky drove alone, the windshield wipers keeping a hypnotic rhythm. Since the previous night, he couldn't get Adana out of his mind. Her exhausted face, her curly hair matted by the rain, her baby nestled in her arms. It all haunted him. The image of simplicity and strength had broken something inside him that luxurious meetings, parties, and bank accounts could never touch. Where is she now? He wondered, his fingers gripping the steering wheel. As the avenue opened, before him, illuminated by the wet headlights, he saw her, alone, huddled, fighting the wind and rain, with her baby crying incessantly. His heart raced. He couldn't miss this chance. He gently pressed the brake, and the sleek black luxury car slowed to a stop at the bus stop. The window rolled down, and his intense brown eyes met hers. Hey, would you like a ride today? The bus definitely won't come now, he said, his voice calm, but laced with restrained urgency. Adana froze for a moment. Her instinct screamed not to accept help from strangers, but this wasn't just any stranger. And more than that, Emeka's cries seemed to beg for shelter. She looked at her baby, felt his little body shivering from the cold, and took a deep breath. Her answer came in silence as she opened the door and got into the car. The warmth of the car's interior enveloped mother and child instantly. The scent of new leather, mixed with Cheek's subtle cologne, contrasted with the smell of rain and street that clung to her wet clothes. Adana shrank into the seat, her eyes lowered, trying not to drip water onto the pristine upholstery. Her calloused hands, marked by market work, gripped the leather seat as if they didn't belong. Two worlds had collided in silence. Cheeky noticed her discomfort and tried to break the silence. What's his name? He asked, looking at the baby with a softness he rarely showed anyone. Emeka, she replied softly, almost shyly. The car moved down the wet avenue. The sound of rain hitting the roof created a melancholic soundtrack, interrupted only by the baby's occasional sobs. Cheeky wanted to keep the conversation going but didn't want to seem intrusive. Curiosity, however, outweighed his caution. He's beautiful. He must get his strength from you, doesn't he? Adana took a deep breath and, for the first time, looked directly at the man beside her. His gaze held no judgment or pity. It was the look of someone who genuinely wanted to listen. Yes, he's everything I have and everything I need to keep going. Her voice came out choked, and perhaps for the first time in a long while, she felt the urge to talk about herself. The words came slowly, punctuated by bitter memories. Doesn't his father feel proud of you both? Cheek asked. Adana lowered her head, her expression tensing, and said, his father left us when Emika was 2 months old. I was left with debts, no family nearby. I've been working at the market since then, carrying crates, sweeping floors, selling fruit. Some days I share a piece of bread with him at night, but we keep surviving. The silence that followed was heavy. Cheeky felt something crack inside him. With each sentence, he felt the weight of a life he had never known, and the quiet shame of knowing that while she struggled to share a piece of bread, he lived surrounded by feasts that no longer had any flavor. The baby stirred in his mother's lap and let out a loud sneeze, drawing a spontaneous laugh from her. Cheek looked over and for the first time in weeks laughed too. Not a social laugh, not a rehearsed one, a real laugh born from the warmth of human connection. Adana smiled back shyly and felt the atmosphere finally lighten. That rainy night, which had begun with fear and exhaustion, now held something different, and in Cheek's chest a new feeling began to blossom. An entire world of wealth was worth nothing compared to the simple joy of being in that car with that woman and her child, listening to the soft sound of a genuine laugh. In that moment he understood. Everything money had bought never filled the void that this simplicity was beginning to touch, and for the first time in years, Cheeky didn't want to return to his silent mansion. Everyone has a story that's marked their life. If you have one, comment I have mine, because shared stories strengthen those still fighting. The rain fell lightly over Lagos as the black car slowly turned onto a dirt road. The wheels splashed through, puddles reflecting the dim streetlights. It was a humble neighborhood, quiet with small houses crowded together. Some doors were ajar, and soft voices drifted from inside, but the atmosphere was one of exhaustion and survival. Chike parked in front of a simple house with a leaking roof and a weathered wooden door. He got out first, opening an umbrella to shield Adana and her baby. Inside, the smell of dampness, dust, and baby milk filled the air. The wind slipped through the cracks, making the tattered curtains sway. He looked around in silence. Buckets on the floor caught dripping water from the roof, a thin mattress lay in the corner of the room, and there was little furniture beyond an old table and a rickety chair. The baby coughed softly, and the sound echoed in the empty room like a stab to Adana's heart. Without a word, Cheeky took off his expensive coat and gently wrapped it around the boy. The soft, warm fabric felt out of place in the cold room, but brought immediate comfort. Adana swallowed hard, her face burning with shame and gratitude. "Thank you. You've been so kind to me tonight," she said, her voice low and trembling. Cheek shook his head and replied in a firm but warm tone, "No need to call me sir, and if it's up to me, you'll never feel alone again. You have a friend in me, you can count on me for anything. Here's my number. Call any time, no matter when. If you need me, I'll be here." She held the card he handed her, as if it were a key to another world. But her humility spoke louder. "I don't even know how to thank you. I never imagined someone like you, you, would do this for me." Chike gave a slight, melancholic and sincere smile. That tired face before him, lit only by the faint streetlight coming through the half-open door, seemed to awaken something in him he didn't even know still existed. Life is strange, Adana. Sometimes you meet people who seem meant to show up at the right moment. You're one of those people for me. She lowered her eyes, clutching her now sleeping baby. His words echoed in her mind as she watched him walk back to the car. The SUV disappeared down the dark street, and her heart grew restless. Who was this man? Why so much kindness? A millionaire could be anywhere in the world, and he chose to help me. Adana prepared the simple mattress for her baby, tucking him in with the coat Cheeky had left behind. The house was quiet, but her thoughts wouldn't stop. The image of him smiling in the doorway kept returning. A man so wealthy, so elegant, sitting on her broken sofa. It was almost impossible to believe it had happened. Hours later, the night brought fear. The baby began to stir on the mattress, letting out small whimpers. When Adana touched his forehead, she felt the heat rise through her hand, a fever. Her heart raced. She tried rocking him, singing softly, but the fever only worsened, and his breathing grew rapid. "Not now, please, not now," she whispered, her voice trembling. The clock neared midnight, and the neighborhood was silent. She stepped outside with the baby in her arms, the light rain wetting her shoulders, and tried flagging down any passing car or motorcycle. Nothing. Not even an improvised taxi or motorbike was out at that hour. With every passing minute, the fever rose and Emeka's skin burned against her arm. Desperation gripped her chest. Tears came, hot and silent, mingling with the rainwater. She went back inside, trembling, and looked at the makeshift table where Cheek's card still lay. Her hand hovered over it for a moment. Pride screamed, "Don't bother him, he's an important man. You'll be a burden." Necessity countered, "Your son needs help now." Adana paced back and forth, her heart torn. She looked at her baby and saw his half-closed eyes, his breathing hot and fragile. In that moment, all fear and hesitation fell away. She picked up the phone with trembling hands. She dialed the numbers slowly, taking deep breaths with each press. When she held the phone to her ear, it felt like the entire world held its breath with her. On the other end, a deep, calm voice answered almost immediately. "Adana." She closed her eyes, fighting back tears, and said in a voice weaker than she wanted, "I need help. It's Emeka, he's not okay." In that instant, Chaiki felt a surge of urgency and protectiveness he had never felt before. Within a minute, he was putting on his coat and heading out the door. Their lives were about to change forever. If you believe true love can be born in the most unexpected moments, right here, I believe in the love that transforms lives. I want to see how many hearts still believe in that hope. The night stretched on quietly as the black SUV sped around the corner of the dirt road. The headlights pierced the darkness, reflecting in the puddles formed by the relentless rain. As soon as it stopped in front of the simple house, Chike jumped out before the engine shut off. At the door, Adana held her baby, her eyes brimming with tears. The fever made little Emeka burn in his mother's arms. Without hesitation, Chike gently took the child and spoke with urgency but in a comforting tone. "Let's go, quick. He'll be okay, I promise." Adana ran after him, climbing into the car with her heart racing. The vehicle tore through the streets of Lagos like an arrow. Inside, only the sound of the rain and the engine filled the heavy silence, thick with fear and tension. Adana stared at her son, battling guilt and helplessness, yet relieved she wasn't alone. At the wheel, Chiki kept his eyes on the road, glancing only briefly at the child, feeling an unfamiliar wave of protectiveness and desperation. The hospital appeared, lit up like a beacon in the night. Nurses came running as the SUV pulled up. Cheek's imposing presence and steady gaze were enough to spur the team into immediate action. Emeka was taken for treatment without question. The hours that followed felt endless. Sitting on a plastic chair, in the cold corridor, Adana's hands trembled, her eyes red from crying. Beside her, Cheek stayed the entire time, silent, solid as a pillar. At one point, he placed a cup of coffee in her hands and said softly, "Drink a little. You need strength for him." The gesture drew from her a look filled with gratitude and disbelief. It was hard to comprehend how someone like this man was there, in the middle of the night, beside a woman who had been a stranger until then. When the doctor returned, his calm smile brought immediate relief. "He'll be fine. It was just a high fever, likely caused by the cold and exhaustion. He's stable now." Adana's legs nearly gave out from the overwhelming relief. Cheek supported her by the shoulders and murmured, "I told you he'd be okay." In the simple hospital room, only the beep of the monitor and Emeka's soft breathing broke the silence. Adana took a deep breath, summoning the courage to speak. "I don't have words to thank you. What you did for me and my son, I'll never forget. And don't worry about the hospital bill. I'll pay it off little by little." Cheek turned slowly, his heart racing. Her small, tired hands rested in her lap. The mix of pride and vulnerability in her gaze made him lose his composure. He took her hands and spoke with a sincerity that came from his soul. "Adana, let me take care of you both. Since that day on the bus, I can't get you out of my mind. Everything reminds me of you. If you'll allow it, I want to be more than a friend. I want to be your partner. I want to love you like no one ever has and transform your life. Will you let me take care of you both?" Her heart raced. His words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. She lowered her head, overwhelmed by a wave of feelings she could barely name. Chike gently squeezed her hands, feeling the tension grow. "But if this isn't what you want, I understand. Maybe I spoke too soon. Forgive me if it seemed wrong. Don't misunderstand me." The silence that followed felt eternal. Finally, she lifted her face, her eyes brimming with tears and her voice steady though choked. "It's what I want most right now. My answer will always be yes to you." He held his breath for a moment, absorbing every word. Adana continued as if unloading the weight of her past. "You made me see a side of myself I didn't know still existed. The side that believes life can still be good. Yes, I want to be by your side." Cheek's eyes shone. He leaned his forehead against hers in a silent gesture of promise as Emeka slept peacefully in the crib beside them. For the first time in years, Chiki felt he was no longer alone, and Adana discovered that life could still offer something beyond the daily struggle. Outside, Lagos continued awake, indifferent to what was happening in that simple room. But for them, the world had paused for a moment. An entire future awaited them, and nothing would be the same from then on. Do you want to know what happens next? Comment, I want to. And let's break a comment record for part 2.